I have combined the DNA of the world's most evil animals to make the most evil creature of them all.
It turns out it's man.
Developer Diary 270 is dropped, and we now have very concrete information on the nature of the massive changes coming to the Ascension Paths and how they're going to become traditions. We're going to dive into the nitty-gritty and find out more about the changes coming to Psionic. We're also going to get to look at the changes coming to the biological Ascension Path, as well as the new Leviathan traits that you're going to get your hands on if you decide to biologically ascend. Yes, you heard me correctly. We're going to be taking DNA from Leviathans in the game and splicing them into our population if we go down the biological Ascension Path. Cybernetic Ascension is being looked at here, one of the new Ascension Paths that they're adding, which is basically a split off from the old Synthetic Ascension Path, and this path is going to be coming with a whole host of new cybernetic traits that are going to be changing the way that we play our cybernetic pops. Stick around for all that and more as we dive in. All the way back in Developer Diary 257, Alfred went over some of his plans for the summer experiments. In particular, he planned to look at what could be done with tradition trees and getting them behind various requirements. And today we're going to be looking in detail at the fruits of that labour. As of 3.1 Lem, there is now massive flexibility in how empires can choose traditions. You basically get a canvas and you can paint it with the tradition trees that you want to pick. Alfred is looking at how gating tradition trees behind various triggers might influence the game. There have been some ideas suggesting that introducing tradition trees that are locked behind Ascension perks or origins would be interesting, and he is seeing where that could lead. Now what wasn't mentioned was that they have been wanting to rework how the Ascension Paths from Utopia work for quite some time, with the original design framework written all the way back in the summer of 2021, and now seems like the best opportunity if any. For those of you that attended PDXCon, or if you got to see my video on it, because I did manage to do a video on this presentation, there was a presentation given by Alfred and Aladrin previewing the summer experiments, which I was then able to share. That was the combat rework and the Ascension rework. And that's what we get to see today, the meat and bones of these changes. It turned out that these experiments proved successful internally, and they'll be moving to test them in the 3.6 Orion open beta. That's an important point to make here. Yes, we're going to be getting an open beta not just to test out these changes to the Ascension Path rework, but also test out the changes to the combat system, the combat mechanics, and the ship system that we have in the game. We don't yet have a date for this, but now it's 100% confirmed. It is in a dev diary. We're going to be getting an Orion open beta very, very soon. Let's start by recapping what the current state of Ascension Paths is as of 3.5. So in essence, there are 3 or 5 Ascension Paths depending on how you look at things. There is the Psionic Ascension Path, only available to regular normie biological empires. It does of course require the Utopia DLC, and there are 2 routes. Mind over Matter Ascension perk followed by the Transcendence Ascension perk, or the Teachers of the Shroud Origin followed by the Transcendence Ascension perk. The Genetic Ascension Path is available to regular empires and biological hive mind empires. Again, it requires the Utopia DLC, and it means you'll take the Engineered Evolution Ascension perk and the Evolutionary Mastery Ascension perk. And then we get the Synthetic Evolution, which in some ways is kind of 2 different evolutions if you want to stop partway through. This is only available to regular biological empires, requires Utopia, and it starts with the Flesh is Weak Ascension perk. You'll then get a project to upgrade all of your population to be cyborgs, to be cybernetic, and then after that you can then take the Synthetic Evolution Ascension perk after you've researched synthetics, the highest level of robot technology, and then you will get a project to uplift all of your pops from their cybernetic state into a fully synthetic and sentient lifestyle. Because of the fact that this Ascension Path, if you take it, locks off any possible form of machine uprising, it is possible to stop halfway through and only go down the kind of cybernetic route of this ascension and become cyborgs and then simply keep the machines around as slaves. That is possible, especially if you want to keep your hands on some of the juicy biological traits that you might have in your empire, like trade value traits. And then there is also the Ascension perk Synthetic Age, which is only available to machine intelligences and is, for a very technical definition, an Ascension Path, even though all it really does is give you some extra bonus points for modifying your robot pops, though it is technically one of the Ascension Paths, very, very technically, and that has been noted here. So that is the current state of the Ascension Paths. These have now been reworked, so instead of an Ascension Path having a structure of 2 Ascension perks, which require various technologies or special projects, they each have an Ascension perk which gives a guaranteed research option upon selection and grants access to the Ascension Path in the form of a tradition tree. Thus, under the rework, we now have the following. The Psionic Ascension is still only available to regular empires and still requires Utopia. To start it, you need the Mind Over Matter Ascension perk or Teachers of the Shroud Origin, and then you need to take the Psionic Tradition. Yes, that's right, the way we're going to be completing our Ascension Paths is by taking a specific tradition. This will mean we will have one less Ascension perk we need to take for all of our Ascension Paths, but we will have one less tradition slot available if we want to complete an Ascension. Genetic is basically the same again. It starts with Engineered Evolution Ascension perk, and then you need to complete the Genetic Tradition. Now we get to the really interesting stuff though, which is we're going to have 2 separate Ascensions, the Cybernetic Ascension and the Synthetic Ascension. What used to just be the Synthetic is now going to be split up into 2 completely separate paths. Cybernetic Ascension is available to regular empires, hive minds, and driven assimilator machine empires. It requires Utopia, and the way to start this one is, if you're a regular empire, to take the Flesh is Weak Ascension perk, or a hive mind need to take the Organo-Machine Interfacing Ascension perk, or if you are a driven assimilator, you need to assimilate 30 pops into your empire, which is probably the easiest way to do this of all because it doesn't require an Ascension perk. And then you have to complete the Cybernetic Tradition tree. The Synthetic Ascension is basically the second half of the previous Synthetic Ascension, but without the cybernetic preamble. Available to regular empires and also now to machine intelligences. It requires Utopia or Synthetic Dawn for machine empires. You have to take the Synthetic Evolution Ascension perk or Synthetic Age Ascension perk if you're a machine empire, and then complete the Synthetic Traditions. This will mean though that all machine empires should now get access to the synthetic technology, synthetic trait, and all of the benefits that come therein. Each of these tradition trees has incorporated all of the benefits of the previous Ascension Paths. That's all of the different bonuses, modifiers, and the like that you would get from taking the Ascension perks, with some new goodies added for the Ascension Paths where the developers felt they were needed. Due to how traditions within the trees are unlocked, they've also found that this leads to a more gradual route through the paths, instead of saving up Ascension perk slots and then taking an entire path while the game is paused, and hey presto, you have ascended. As expected, all values and art shown in a minute are not final. Things can and most likely will shift during testing. So with that overview out of the way, let's dive into the specifics of these new traditions. First up, there is the Psionic Tradition. I must admit, I do quite like the artwork here. It definitely feels very psionic. And here are all of the current proposed effects for this tradition. So what has remained from the previous version of the game? Mind Over Matter will still grant telepathy as a research option. It does require psionic theory and can't be taken as your first Ascension perk. For Teachers of the Shroud Empires, this path is still partially unlocked at the start of the game, and to progress does require the psionic theory technology. Whether or not that means you start with this tradition unlocked and already locked into place as your first tradition, I don't actually know, but that will be interesting to see. What has actually changed though? Mind Over Matter has had the bulk of its bonuses either moved to the opener, the latent psionic trait, or the Psi-Core tradition. That then does mean though that this Ascension perk is basically a key to then unlock a further tradition. So when you get the Ascension perk, you won't immediately feel any bonus, or very little in the way of bonuses, because as far as I can tell, they've moved almost all of the bonuses out from the Ascension perk and they put it into this tradition. So you will still have to wait a large number of months and save up even more tradition points to actually unlock the effects like latent psionic, which I'm not entirely sure I'm in favor of that specific change. I think that might have it might not feel good to unlock an entire Ascension perk and kind of feel like you've not got anything from it. It just lets you kind of go further down the path. But we'll have to see what people feel when they get to the open beta. Transcendence has had its boons shared between the 3 remaining traditions. The +5 or +10% energy from jobs provided by latent psionic and psionic traits has been replaced with 5 or 10% unity from jobs, as this was more in line with the desired focus for psionic and particularly spiritualist empires. Telepaths provided a planet-wide bonus of +5% resources from POPs modifier. This has been replaced with a +5% resources from psionic POPs, so that non-psionic POPs in your empire no longer have their performance improved by the mere presence of a telepath. However, this modifier increases to +10% when the Breach the Shroud tradition is taken, meaning that the 2 telepath jobs from a Psy-Core building will provide a massive +20% to the resource output of the planet if all POPs working are psionic. So although a psionic empire may have fewer POPs than the other Ascension Paths, these POPs should in theory be more efficient. Let's break that down briefly for a moment because I'm not entirely convinced there. So when we've got synthetic or the biological ascension paths, we can get some bonuses stacked to provide further output from our jobs by getting more traits, or in the case of synthetics, being an inherent synthetic gives extra bonuses in terms of the leaders and all of that. Whether or not this scales up exactly with that, I do think it might be slightly more, but with overtuned and the way that can now work with biological, you're not going to be getting more research, I don't think, than an overtuned genetic ascension empire, which has got all of the intelligent traits and all of the overtuned intelligent traits stacked together for a whopping +50%. I can't see you beating that here with Psionic, but until we've actually been able to play with this, I'm gonna withhold judgment until the beta, but that's just some early thoughts here. What is actually new here? Well, the Thought Enforcement is now a guaranteed research option with the Psy-Core tradition. The Mind Readers tradition grants a new Empire Edict, Sight Beyond Sight. For those of you that want to live in the Dune universe, you are in a whole heap of luck here, because basically you can play with the Spacing Guild. This provides some rather nice bonuses as your Navy's navigators are supplied with an abundance of Zro, which will give +1 sensor range, massive reduction in the hyperdrive charge time, hyperdrive cooldown, and jump drive cooldown, as well as +15% quantum catapult accuracy. Finally, the finisher for the tradition tree grants 50 Edict Fund, and more importantly, a special project that, when completed, will allow you to form a covenant with a random Shroud entity. Whilst I'm upset that you don't get to pick which chaos god you want to form a pact with, I think it's very, very great that we're now going to have a guaranteed way of always forming a covenant, which, as the Shroud is so RNG based, can sometimes not happen during your entire game, which is really, really annoying. If you're enjoying this video and you'd like to support this channel, you can do so by going to montuplays.com and purchasing something from Montu Plays merchandise. So far we've only got a few t-shirts and a phone case, but keep your optic nerves peeled as we expand the range. There's also a link to that down in the description below. In comparison, the genetic tradition tree is slightly simpler, as the traditions themselves aren't locked behind special projects. This is because to get the most use out of it, you'll likely be doing a fair few special projects to modify all of the species in your empire. You of course need to get engineered evolution, and this is the nice artwork that we're going to be getting, I think, for the new tradition tree for genetic ascension. And here are all of the proposed effects for this tradition tree. What has changed? Well, the benefits from engineered evolution and evolutionary mastery have been arranged to follow a logical progression through the tradition tree, where you gradually unlock more and more advanced species modifications. What is new? Efficient cloning doubles, and I'm going to say that again, doubles the output of clone vats without increasing their upkeep, which should make them somewhat more competitive with empires that favour a more metallic path. Yes, because that means you'll be getting at least 6 pop assembly from this, which, given the changes we're going to be seeing to synthetic in a little bit, could make genetic actually more powerful from a pop creation perspective than synthetic empires, which might actually shaft synthetic empires quite a lot. Enhanced Expression allows you to add another trait pick on your modified species, meaning you can cram more traits onto a species. Yes, you'll be able to get 6 traits onto your species. Genetic Traditions, completing it allows you to research special transgenesis technologies. These technologies allow you to add lithoid traits to non-lithoids, plantoid traits to non-plantoids or fungoids, and if you've harvested the DNA from certain leviathans, you can now splice in some rather special traits into your species' genetic code. And here are the leviathan traits that are available. And these are actually really quite interesting. Not necessarily the most powerful, all of them, but they have some very interesting effects that I could see being very useful in some of your games. Remember, Leviathans are those creatures out there in the galaxy we don't always get to find. They're randomly spawned, and even if they do spawn, we might not get the chance to harvest their DNA because another empire might get there first. The first trait is Drake Scaled. This trait requires that the player has harvested the genetic material from a space dragon, either the Ether Drake, Shard, or a Sky Dragon. This is presented as an event option when the Leviathan is slain. I think this means that you'll have the choice between going with the Leviathan's parade opportunity and getting the final relic out of it possibly, or the special planetary bonus, or instead harvesting the DNA and throwing away the corpse. Drake Scaled costs you 3 points. Each pop then produces 0.025 monthly alloys. This means with an empire of 1,000 pops, you're going to be getting 25 alloys, which is not amazing, but given the fact it doesn't give you any increase in upkeep, it's just free alloys, that's not so bad either. All of your pops get plus 50% army health, and it is mutually exclusive with other resource generating traits, for instance like the gaseous trait on lithoids, that sort of thing. Whilst this isn't overwhelmingly powerful, I do think it's quite flavorful. Void Spawn I actually do think is a very powerful trait. It's going to cost you 3 points. The trait requires that the player has harvested the genetic material from the Void Spawn. Now, I must admit, I didn't realize the Void Spawn actually had genetic material. I thought it was something of more of an energy type monster or made of dark matter, that sort of thing. But, this revelation is fair enough. This is going to be presented as an event option when the Leviathan is slain. You will replace all food or mineral upkeep with energy upkeep. The habitability floor on all planets will be 50%, meaning you will never have planets that are uninhabitable to you. It is mutually exclusive with phototrophic and radiotrophic traits. But I want to say, as someone that absolutely hates farmers in the universe of Stellaris, of course, being able to replace all food upkeep by giving everyone Voidling, that's the name of this trait, Voidling, is something I would die to do. I would give my left leg, possibly, in order to be able to replace all food upkeep with energy upkeep later on in the game. That would be very, very useful. I mean, that's one of the biggest perks, in my opinion, of synthetically ascending. And now if you find a Void Spawn, you might be able to do just that as a genetically ascended empire. Note that these all cost 3 points, and 3 points, as far as I recall, is beyond the range of any regular empire to get their hands on, unless you start the game with less traits or less trait points spent than you actually need in total, than you can spend, or you fully go and genetic ascend. And the final Leviathan is the Tianki Matriarch. This will be giving us the Polymelic trait, costing 3 points. Again, you need to slay the Leviathan, you get the event option, yada yada. Then, as budding, it will be exactly the same, but instead of granting 0.02 pop assembly per month, per pop even, it will grant 0.05 assembly per pop per month. I believe this trait will be incompatible with budding, otherwise we can get a whopping 0.07 pop assembly per pop per month, which, if we were to combine with mutagenic spars as a hive mind, would be pretty crazily broken, if I do say so myself. And if you're enjoying this video, please splice Leviathan DNA into that like button. They've also added 3 new advanced traits that are unlocked by genetic creation to cover some of the missing bases. These are, in my opinion, quite interesting, and there is one which I am very, very excited about. But let's get into them. So there's Vat Grown, costing 3 points. You get minus 25% pop growth speed, but plus 25% pop assembly speed, and minus 10% housing usage. This could stack very, very nicely with having a fully upgraded biological, the clone vat, because a clone vat is going to be pushing out 6 pop assembly base, which is higher than the maximum pop growth you can get base unless you've got some migration happening. But generally speaking, pop growth speed modifiers don't alter the increases from migration. So this trait overall could lead to a total or a greater total amount of pops on your planets, because there are actually very few ways of getting pop assembly speed, but quite a few ways of getting pop growth speed, especially later on in the game with technologies and traditions and all of that sort of stuff. So this minus 25% is a lot less in total than it sounds, whereas the plus 25% is absolutely massive. Felsic requires lithoid, costs 2 points, and you get minerals from livestock and processing plus 2. This is in essence the same as delicious, but for lithoids. And basically it's going to work the same as that. Nice, well-rounded trait here to kind of balance out the delicious trait that you already get access to. Now we have the greatest trait I think I've ever seen from Biological Ascension, Natural Machinist. Costing only 2 points, you get plus 10% alloys from jobs, plus 10% consumer goods from jobs. So that is a fantastic trait to get, especially in the mid to late game when you're trying to maximize the efficiency of your alloy producing pops. It's going to give you another 10% bonus to stack on top of all the other bonuses you've got, and it's only 2 points. You could combine this with one of the traits that gives you an extra 5% resource output from jobs, possibly two of the traits that give you extra resource output from jobs if you're overtuned, allowing you to get somewhere in the region of 20% extra alloys from jobs just from your regular biological traits, then allowing you to compete with the kind of output you're seeing from your psionic empires or synthetic empires. This is going to help put biologist or biological ascension empires back on a better footing with the other ascension types. If anything, what we're seeing here is some pretty wildly powerful new bonuses for genetic ascension, and in a lot of ways kind of negatives for some of the other ascension paths. Now we're going to get into some of the really spicy changes, and that is the Cybernetic and Synthetic Ascension. What used to be just the synthetic path is of course split into two separate paths, because it would feel apparently better, or feel like a better fit, to wholly devote your empire into embracing cybernetics without going down the mind uploading route if you really wanted to, and that I think does make some sense. It also offers some great bonuses, we're going to get into that in a moment, but this will be a bit of an upgrade for hive mind empires, because they're going to get access to an entirely new ascension path they couldn't possibly touch before, and an upgrade to regular biological empires as well. So, Cybernetic Ascension is no longer unlocked via the robotics line of technologies. Instead, there are new technologies to represent basic cybernetic upgrades that your population has access to. This comes with a change to the powered exoskeletons technology as well. So we have three new technologies. The first is powered exoskeletons. Well, I say new, this one is just changed. Now it grants us plus 5% army damage and plus 5% worker or menial drone output. I say that because it's going to be available to hive mind empires. Then we get a tier 2 technology, which is also engineering industry, that is integrated cybernetics or adaptive cybernetics, depending on whether you are a regular empire or a hive mind. You're going to get plus 5% habitability from this technology. That's not amazing, but it takes us on to the tier 3, which is neuroquantum links, requiring integrated cybernetics technologies, and it is a tier 3 physics technology from the computing specialization. This gives plus 5% specialist or complex drone output, and a specialist or complex output is some of the hardest things to buff in the game and gives us some of the best resources. I'm thinking alloys and unity and research. This additional bonus is really, really good. As the Cybernetic Ascension is now available to hive minds and driven assimilators, they too get access to the Flesh is Weak, albeit with a changed name and description. The Flesh is Weak, or otherwise known as Organo-Machine Interfacing Ascension perk, is available to regular empires, hive minds, and driven assimilators, as we've said. And there are different requirements for unlocking this. Regular empires and hive minds require the integrated cybernetics technology, that's the tier 2 technology we just discussed, that gives you plus 5% habitability. Driven assimilators requires you to have assimilated 30 pops. Regular empires and hive minds gain the neuroquantum links research option, and driven assimilators gain the adaptive cybernetics research option, allowing them to then take cybernetic traditions as well. Because cybernetic traditions are available to multiple empire types, there's also a number of tradition swaps used here to ensure they each get something different that matches their playstyle and abilities in the game. We also get some nice new artwork for this tradition as well that really does seem to focus on the cybernetic side of this Ascension path. There are quite a few things that might stand out from this brand new Cybernetic Ascension and Cybernetic Tradition tree. The ones that I want to point out first off is integrated anatomy on the right hand side. You can add or remove cybernetic traits to cyborg pops. Yes, that means we're going to be getting our hands on specific cybernetic traits that are only available to cyborg pops in the game. As we go further down this path, we'll also increase the number of biological trait picks by a total of 2, allowing us space to put these extra traits into the slots without actually having to remove necessarily some of the different traits we got our hands on right at the start of the game when we designed our species. Because if you recall, as we go through the game, we'll only get technology, even as we gene modify, to get a total of +2 points, but no additional trait slots. So if you've fully maximized your empire, your race, you've probably got all 5 traits, 3 positive, 2 negative, so even with an extra 2 points, you can only realistically remove one of the -1 negative traits and replace that with a single +1 trait. But by getting 2 extra picks, that completely overwrites that. We can just spend the extra 2 points we'll have on 2 extra cybernetic traits to graft onto our species. Also, there is the assembly standards, synaptic processing or crucible worlds on the left hand side. That is going to give the regular empires the ability for roboticists to assemble cyborgs, and for hive mind empires, it's not that great. You get -50% empire size from districts, which is alright, and driven assimilators, they get something rather special and rather thematic. They get crucible worlds. Basically, think of the Borg and think of Unimatrix Zero. That's what we are looking at here. And then at the top of the tree, we've also got transubstantiation synthesis, which allows non-driven assimilators to assimilate organic pops into cyborgs, including into or out of hive minds, meaning that this allows a hive mind empire to assimilate organic pops into hive mind without taking the genetic ascension path. Instead, they only have to take this cybernetic path, and then you're going to get lots and lots of power. Driven assimilators are also allowed to assimilate hive mind pops, very similar to a normal biological empire. The one thing that I do notice from this, it is that it is lacking the ability to get extra pop assembly on your robot plants. That could be quite a weakness and leave it quite a bit behind the regular synthetic ascension that we're going to look at in a moment, or biological ascension, which is now getting a whopping +6 biological production points every month if you put down a clone vat and upgrade it with the upgraded tradition. So, to expand on the Cybernetic Ascension, as we've mentioned, you're now going to get cybernetic traits that are only available to cybernetic pops after taking the integrated anatomy tradition. These traits do make use of normal biological trait points and pick limits, but are not blocked by any biological traits, meaning you can get abilities that will be doubling up. The traits available to cyborgs are based off of the traits available to robotic species. However, they are slightly cheaper in terms of trait points, while giving ace pops a small amount of energy upkeep. And here are the traits that we get. So all of the positive traits here will increase your pop upkeep by 0.5 energy per month. I personally expect that value to change because at present, I personally, after doing a bit of napkin maths, don't think it's really going to be worth it. So in essence here, we've got almost all of the regular machine traits. We've got power drills, harvesters, superconductive, efficient processors, that sort of thing. Notice that they are all 1 point cheaper at least. And we have an extra tradition right at the bottom here, which is trading algorithms. This trading algorithms gives you plus 25% trade value from jobs and means that we can finally realize our dreams of a true trade federation, which is the best at doing trade and creating trade value in the galaxy. We're going to be able to stack this with the regular thrifty trait for a total of plus 50% trade value from jobs, which on a merchant is basically plus 6 trade based. And that's really quite a lot of trade. Yeah, I'm almost in shock. This is really powerful. However, that half an energy per month is really not so good. Let's look at superconductive here as an example. As a base technician's output is 6 energy credits, a 0.5 energy credit cost would translate to a net gain of 0.4 energy per pop working that job, because you're getting an extra 15% for a total of 0.9. That would mean that you would need 55% of your pops working generator jobs to pay for the extra upkeep and break even, or 25% of pops working the job assuming you're at the maximum level of upgrades with the upgraded building and also the orbital ring, giving you a total of 10 energy output per job. That, however, is really bad. So the way to maximize this would be, in my opinion, you'd have to then basically micromanage planets which have lots of technicians on, give them the specific cybernetic upgrade, and don't give it to other planets or give it species wide. That then becomes kind of annoying and fiddly to micromanage. So I do like the idea here of having an energy upkeep. I just think that half an energy is a little on the expensive side for these traits, especially given the fact that none of these traits are going to be boosting pop growth or pop assembly speed or anything like that. I generally really like this idea. I just think it needs a bit more of a balance pass to keep it in line with the other benefits you will be getting from taking the other Ascension routes. But what do you think about the new Ascension Tradition rework? What do you think about these new cybernetic traits? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, very important to note here, Trading Algorithms trait is now going to be available to both robots and cyborgs, meaning that if you're a synthetically ascended empire and you convert all of your populations into robots rather than cyborgs, you'll still get access to a trade value increase from jobs styled trait, which is pretty cool. Synthetic Evolution, or the Synthetic Age Ascension perk, is what you're going to need to take in order to begin going down the Synthetic Ascension Tradition path. For regular empires, you will gain the synthetic technology as a research option, and for machine intelligences, you gain the binary motivators as a research option. This requires droids for regular empires and machine template system for machine empires. But that's a very important question to ask here, and that question is, does this mean that the synthetic technology is now locked behind taking the Synthetic Evolution or Synthetic Age Ascension perks? If it is, this makes this slightly more powerful only because it takes it away from any other empire that doesn't go down the Synthetic Ascension path. And of course, we're getting some artwork here, and the artwork is rather interesting. It's very mechanical looking here. I'm not entirely sure whether I completely love it, but I do think that definitely the right-hand side is rather interesting stuff. Diving into what all of these do, in essence now you're going to get what happened from a Synthetic Evolution Ascension perk, but spread out with a few extra bits and pieces. One big thing to note from this, if you look at the bottom here, is they have very much nerfed synthetic empires, synthetically evolved empires, in terms of their pop assembly potential. The finisher grants only +1 roboticist jobs added to a capital building, or as a machine +1 replicator jobs, meaning you will get a maximum anywhere in the empire of 2 roboticist jobs, unless they give them access to the upgraded version of the robot assembly plant, which I haven't seen written down anywhere, though I think that would be rather nice to give to synthetic empires for additional cost and additional research requirements. Now, the change added here is rather spicy. They've reduced the sheer amount of robot assembly that you could gain by no longer scaling the number of roboticists by the tier of the capital building. Though of the changes made, the ability to convert all species, including other empires' robots, into your synths is rather nice. This means basically, as a synthetically ascended empire, no matter what the population type is that you take on, you can assimilate that into a single species, completely eliminating all micromanagement and all of that kind of nonsense from the game if you so wish. And as far as I'm concerned, that is a big benefit, even if it's not massively powerful anymore. Another change they've made along this rework was that the Mechanist origin has lost 5% robot upkeep modifier, there was a reduction, and they've exchanged that for plus 15% robot build speed and plus 1 robot trait pick, along with having the machine template system technology available as a research option from the start of the game. Overall, my thoughts and feelings on this rework from what I've read so far is that they have nerfed Synthetic. Cybernetic is currently slightly too expensive for the traits, and the benefits then I'm not sure they're going to weigh up in the same way. Genetic has been massively buffed in terms of extra traits that it's been given, along with the fact that you're going to double up the pop assembly. Yes, I'm pretty confident this puts biological as the better one to take in terms of late game scaling potential. Although Psionic is still very powerful because of how early you can get it in the game, especially given the fact that you can take Teachers of the Shroud Origin. And I think, as far as I can tell, that then means the first thing you could do is research the psionic theory technology, and within, 5 to 10 years, be going down the path of psionic tradition and completing that as your very first tradition if you really, really wanted to. And that in essence further increases the speed at which you'll be able to psionically ascend. So we will have to see how this all shakes out with the open beta. Keep your eyes peeled for more information on when that will be coming. And if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to find out about all the changes coming to Stellaris 3.6, they're going to be changing our galaxy maps, giving us more galaxy map options. Click the video on screen now.